Graduation Day Part 2. The day of Mayor Elbrun's ascension finally arrives, and the gang finally comes up with a plan.
We open with Buffy watching the truck with Faith's body drive away, and she looks around in confusion and doesn't do anything. This episode is already off to a great start in my book.
And right after she leaves, Mayor Elbrun arrives. He tells his vampire goon to find the Slayers, and he appears visibly worried.
Giles and Xander are still researching the Ascension when Cordelia comes in demanding to know why Wesley is leaving the country. And Giles lets her know that Buffy is no longer under the Watcher's Council.
We see Angel, who is unfortunately still alive and being cared for by Willow, and he says that he was wrong and he needs Buffy. And my next note is, this episode is going great so far.
I'm surprised you said it at this point, because I said it after the first scene. When Buffy shows up, Angel professes his love for her, and she tells him he can live if he drinks her blood.
Because only the blood of a Slayer can cure him.
And the whole thing is too dramatic for him to stay lying down, so he abruptly stands up and dramatically stumbles into a coffee table, even though he was too weak to even open his eyes about 30 seconds ago.
Angel doesn't want to drink Buffy's blood because she might die, so Buffy starts punching him for some reason, which for some reason makes him bite her.
And we get some real 90s camera work and Batman Forever music as he drains Buffy.
It was very over-the-top and nonsensical, with a really dumb allusion to them having sex. It was laughably ridiculous.
Pretty sure I already mentioned Batman Forever. He runs her to the hospital, to which I thought, hey, yeah, that would have been a great pre-planning step. Even having a bunch of bags of blood on hand in the library, since that's where they do the rest of their stuff anyway.
The doctor tries to get relevant information from Angel, but he acts like an idiot, reminding me of the way everyone acted back in Killed by Death.
Any hour tonight. Just help her.
What a good callback.
And it turns out the mayor is also there with Faith, and he's hearing that there's almost no chance she'll ever regain consciousness.
Which I was very skeptical of.
Me too.
I kind of thought it would happen before the end of this episode and was surprised when it didn't. Mayor Elbrun finds out that Buffy is there and tries to smother her, but Angel stops him. But then he just lets him walk out. Why couldn't he just grab him and take him somewhere?
Well, I think we asked in the last episode why they didn't just put him in the cage in the library.
Yeah, it keeps getting dumber and dumber when they don't do it.
And he does all of this in front of the hospital staff, but they don't really do anything.
Yeah, they even call for security, but nobody ever shows up. I hope I never end up at that hospital.
I hope I never end up on this show, period.
The rest of the gang shows up and Angel explains what happened, and Xander in particular is very upset about him drinking Buffy's blood and acts like a fucking idiot.
And of course Angel's not as direct as he could be, and does not mention how much Buffy insisted that he drain her and beat the crap out of him to force him to feed on her.
And they tell him to leave because the sun is going to be coming up. Then we get a pseudo-deep scene of Buffy talking to Faith in her head, or them sharing thoughts or something, it doesn't really matter, where they're all chummy for some reason, and Faith, for some reason, reveals that Mayor Elbrun's weakness is his human side. It felt like Joss Whedon had just watched an episode of Twin Peaks and said, hey, I can be pseudo-pretentious too.
And then Faith seemingly wakes Buffy up, with her hair done and everything.
Buffy gets up and kisses Faith, then walks out into the hall and tells the others to get everyone and that she is ready for war.
So did the hospital just leave her clothes there also?
And was there no alert that she got up out of bed? Is nobody watching anything?
At the morning of graduation, Buffy has just laid out the plan for the gang, and they're all talking about how crazy it is.
But of course we don't get to hear it.
And she also points out how Xander is the key to the plan, and asks if he remembers his military training from Halloween.
And I couldn't believe they were bringing that up again after not doing so for so long. But she says she needs more than a rocket launcher this time.
She brings up Faith's cryptic, that's in quotes, message about the mayor's human weakness.
And Willow asks if she found out about that before or after she put Faith in a coma, which was a question that made no sense in context.
And they eventually determine that the mayor's human weakness is Faith. So I assumed part of the plan would be getting a cardboard cutout of Faith and running with it in front of them.
At one point, Angel mentions that Mayor Elbrun is a germaphobe, which I thought was going to become important in some way, but it never does. But I liked Cordelia's suggestion.
We'll get a container of Ebola virus, or it doesn't even have to be real. We can just get a box that says Ebola on it and chase them.
I assumed that meant Xander was going to use his military training to get some biological weapons.
Wesley walks in, and Buffy reiterates that she's done with the council, but he says he just wants to help. And as Buffy continues laying out her plan with her goons, Mayor Elbrun does the same with his.
The gang is going around pulling past characters to tell them what their part of the plan is, which was interesting.
And Wesley and Cordelia end up alone in the library, where Wesley mentions that he'll be going back to England.
They get awkwardly physical, but it's not really doing anything for them, and the whole thing grinds to a screeching halt. I'm glad there was a huge payoff to that whole arc.
Yeah, it wasn't as funny as I think it was supposed to be. Buffy and Angel talk, and Angel says that if they survive, he's not going to say goodbye, he's just going to leave. A decision that I was more than okay with.
And we get the expected Buffy moping alone as she pulls out Faith's bloody knife. And I'm saying that as it's a knife covered in blood, not in a Giles Faith's bloody knife way, even though that was more Australian than English.
Yeah. And suddenly, it's time for the commencement ceremony as everyone takes their seats. Principal Snyder gets in a good line as usual.
This is a time of celebration, so sit still and be quiet.
I like the one where he said,
I saw that gesture. You see me after graduation.
And he introduces Mayor Tam Elbrun III.
Please welcome our distinguished guest speaker, Richard Wilkins III.
He talks about how it's the centennial and how it's been a long road, etc. For as big as the school seems to be, there are not a lot of kids sitting out in the graduating class.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of funny. They want this to seem really big, but it ironically makes it look kind of small. Willow and Oz arrive late because they were banging, showing that they have their priorities in order.
And during the mayor's speech, a CGI eclipse starts.
And he begins to convulse, before mutating into a big cartoon snake monster.
Oh, it was my worst fear. A big CGI snake. Did they not learn their lesson in Band Candy?
Apparently not.
Man.
Or maybe they thought it worked so well that they were like, hey, we got to do that again.
What a disappointment. And arguing that it's the 90s doesn't really work because they've used cool practical monsters up to this point. And this is the season finale, so I would think they would be pumping more money into it.
Everyone but the students start to run as an army of vampires approaches from behind.
But just behind, so people could escape via the sides, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess a bunch of them probably do. Then Buffy yells, now, and the students reveal that they all have weapons. And Buffy said that a rocket launcher wouldn't be enough, but that would have been much better than what they got instead.
I get the flamethrowers and crossbows, but what were the people with close-range weapons, like swords and maces, really going to do? Were they going to charge up to the big CGI snake and just start smacking it? And a select group attacked the vampires with flaming arrows, and I wasn't aware that that many students would be so effective with bows, presumably only having less than a day to learn.
And as the vampires retreat, Angel shows up with a bunch of other people to stop them. At one point, we see Larry get cartoon smacked by the Elbrun snake, which was my favorite part of the episode because it was so dumb.
And during the fighting, Snyder gets eaten, which was a huge letdown.
Agreed. R.I.P.
Everybody's still fighting.
Wesley gets knocked down, Harmony gets bitten, and Cordelia actually gets to kill a vampire.
Buffy, in her plan to exploit the mayor's human weakness, shows him Faith's bloody knife.
And talks about stabbing her with it.
Like butter.
And she has a good line.
You want to get it back from me? Dick.
And he CGI smashes his way through the school to get her. And it turns out there's a huge bomb in the library, and Giles detonates it.
And it turns out the entire school must have been made out of explosive materials because everything else explodes too.
Why the mayor couldn't just pull out is beyond me.
Yeah, when he was smashing through walls and everything.
Instead, he decides to make a comical one-liner.
Well, gosh.
And this whole ending reminded me of the ending to Slugs, where everything's exploding, and then afterward, everything looks kind of the same, with the fire trucks and the lighting.
No one's going to watch our Slugs video. Get over it. There's a link in the description.
Afterward, Wesley is wheeled off on a stretcher, and Buffy and Xander talk, where Xander says that Angel survived but must have already left,
Giles hands her diploma,
which he somehow recovered for some reason, and then Buffy sees Angel standing off to the side, staring at her like a weirdo, as usual.
They don't say anything out loud, but their gaze spoke 1,000 truths.
Then he turns and walks away. Good riddance. The gang contemplates everything, and they talk about how they won the battle and survived high school. It was really lame, especially given that Oz was the one who made the high school comment, which I wouldn't have expected. And I couldn't help thinking how the only lesson these people would really take away from this was that they could slack off and still come out on top, which just made me hate them even more. I know that was a lot, but...
That works. My last sentence was the gang talks to each other. The end.
Graduation Day Part 2. Overall?
At first, it was cool to see all these characters. Some, who only showed up for an episode or two, will all have a part in this plan to stop the mayor, and I was looking forward to what the plan was. Unfortunately, the plan was stupid. While very dramatic, the whole thing was pretty laughable. I guess it was supposed to make us throw up our fist and go, yeah! But it did not. It was more flashy than anything else. Buffy has had fights that felt like they held way more weight, even if they weren't as big. And giant CGI monsters is always a great idea, regardless of what year it is. As is showcased by pretty much all the big budget movies we see today. Everything the mayor had been building up for, all the plotting and scheming, felt like it was going to lead up to something that was going to be awesome and have a big impact. This was not that. Yes, there were a bunch of vampires and kids with swords, and the whole school exploded, but that felt like it was to make up for the actual events being pretty lame. Faith being used as hitting the mayor's human weakness didn't really feel like it had that big of an impact either. I think part of it was because of how Faith's character kind of fizzled out over the course of the season. What a depressing finale. I do have some outstanding questions though. Does any of this stuff make it outside of Sunnydale, like on the news, ever? What are these students, or any person who has gone on from this place, said wherever they end up? Do they talk about demons and people getting murdered and monsters? Do they think that's normal and it happens everywhere? I think a high school completely exploding would at least make it to state level news. Or a giant CGI snake.
Especially when the school was blown up by the librarian.
I gave this one a D.
Dang.
You can try and convince me to raise it up a little bit, but it's going to be a tough sell.
No, I struggled between a D+ and a C-. I ended up going with a C-. It's honestly hard to say that this episode was truly disappointing, because I didn't expect to like it very much based on the lead-up. But for a season finale, it definitely felt like it needed more. We got our big final battle, which was both bigger and dumber than I expected. But it felt like it was all about stopping the mayor, and didn't have a lot of deeper significance for the characters, which made the resolution feel kind of empty. Faith was basically already out of the picture, so that didn't really resolve in a satisfying way, although I'm sure she'll be back at some point. Mayor Elbrun just turned into a big monster and then died. Xander got them weapons and was annoying. Willow and Oz just kept referencing how they banged. Giles was there. Snyder, the best character in the show, died very unceremoniously. Other than Wesley and Cordelia, which was always more of a joke than a true subplot, Buffy and Angel were really the only ones that were directly impacted by the events. And the ending amounted to nothing more than the two of them staring at each other. And that whole relationship wasn't exactly deep to begin with. And we already knew what was going to happen because they told us. Seeing it actually happen didn't add anything to it. From a character standpoint, not much happened in this episode. Angel getting poisoned and then Buffy being in the hospital ended up feeling like it didn't really matter, especially since it was all dealt with pretty much immediately and with no lasting effects. And then there was that dumb scene with Buffy and Faith psychically communicating or whatever the was happening. I could have done without that.
Why was Faith the cat? I know Faith was lying down on the bed, but it made it look like the cat turned into Faith.
No idea.
Does her consciousness move to a cat? Because that would be awesome. And then they could have a thing with Amy.
Yeah, I can see where they're going with it. Okay.
Cat and mouse.
Maybe this show is a lot smarter than we give it credit for.
Yeah.
Like you said, Buffy finding out Mayor Elbrun's supposed weakness didn't end up mattering. She got him to chase her, but I don't see why he wouldn't have done that anyway. For as much as I hated season 2, at least the ending had strong personal significance to Buffy, and her leaving Sunnydale at the end was intriguing. This season just kind of ended on a very flat note. It wasn't terrible, it just felt very empty.
Agreed. So hopefully, when we come back in season 4,
things will be better.
Yeah.
At least we'll be done with high school.
Hopefully. We don't know if they all graduated. So, on a similar note, we're going to end this review very empty. Thanks. Bye.